Hey guys, it's Miss Leibowitz. So this week we've been working on comparing and contrasting, and I want to take it a little step further because we know how to compare and contrast and talk about how things are the same and how things are different. But to really get you ready for third grade, we need to talk about how we can compare and contrast stories that have different versions. So comparing and contrasting two different actual stories instead of just comparing and contrasting something that's in one story. So for the rest of the week, we'll probably be focusing on um, taking two stories that are similar and comparing and contrasting, saying how they're the same and how they're different. So we're going to get started. This page might look a little familiar to you. Some of you might have already completed it and some of you might not have, and that's fine. That's why we're doing it right now. Some of you might have actually done it in school with me. So let's look. Comparing and contrasting stories. When you're reading two versions of a story, that helps you see how writers can tell the same story in different ways. So when you compare stories, you find how they are different. And when you contrast stories, you find, oh, I'm sorry, when you compare stories, you find how they are alike. And when you contrast stories, you find how they are different. I've been saying the word so many times in my head that I got them mixed up. So sometimes two stories have mostly the same plot. So they have almost exactly the same beginning, middle, and end. But they may have different characters or different settings. And when there's stories that are similar like that, they call these versions. You can see it right here, versions of a story. And different versions of the same story are often told in different countries. So I want you to think about this. There's lots of versions of different shows, like on Netflix. You can have one version of it and then they remake it, and that's a new version, right? So let's look at these two pictures below. They are from two of the versions of the story Little Red Riding Hood. Okay, so this is one version of Little Red Riding Hood, and this is another version, a different version of Little Red Riding Hood. Look at the two pictures below and tell me, how are they the same and how are they different? So we're actually going to create a Venn diagram. So let's see. Let's determine how the characters are different. So we're going to talk about the characters first. First of all, in this one, I have Little Red Riding Hood and I have a wolf. And then this one, I have another girl and I have a wolf, right? So that's how they're the same. We could put that in the both section. So let's go to the next page. I'm going to type it in, both. Both have a girl and wolf or animal. Okay, so that's one way that we have that they're the same. Now, how are they different? The characters themselves are different, right? So Little Red Riding Hood, she's wearing a red hood, and Salma is wearing a head wrap. Okay, so we can put Little Red Riding Hood. She's wearing let's expand this out, wearing a red hood. And then Pretty Salma was wearing a head wrap. Okay, so let's see. How else are they the same, or how else are they different? Well, I see Little Red Riding Hood is carrying a basket, while Pretty Salma is carrying a different basket, right? That she's carrying on her head. It's kind of like a little bucket that has food and a chicken in it. So we can say that she's wearing a red hood. Another thing that makes it different, I'll put a little mark here. Little Red Riding Hood is carrying a small basket. And then Pretty Selma, she is carrying a large open basket on her head. And we can say carrying a small basket with her hands, right? So Little Red Riding Hood is wearing a red hood. She's carrying a small basket with her hands, and Pretty Selma is wearing a head wrap, not a hood, and carrying a large basket on her head. So let's see, how else are these two pictures different? Well, as you can see, one of the other characters is a wolf, while in Pretty Selma, the other character that's like hiding is a dog. So we can say hiding animal is a wolf. And in this one, we can say that the hiding animal is a dog. Now, what about what they're doing? What makes, because we don't want to just talk about how a character looks in different stories, because that doesn't really change things too much, what they look like. We want to think about what are they doing? How are they acting? What problems do they have? So obviously we haven't read both of these stories, so we can't tell that just from pictures, but we can tell that they're doing something. What are they both doing? They're both going somewhere. So we can say we know that they're both walking somewhere. So in the middle, we can talk about how they are both walking somewhere. So I'll put the little, there we go. There's one, here's the next one. Both walking somewhere. We know they're both going somewhere, right? And they both have an animal hiding and watching them. So that's another way that they can be, that they're the same. So let's see, are there any other similarities or differences? We can tell that they might be from different countries, that maybe they're from a different place or even speak different languages because their skin is different colors, right? So I know you guys probably would say that for both. So they have different skin. We can just say different skin color or are from a different place. And we'll add that here. Different skin color, or they're from a different place. You can also tell that by the background in Little Red Riding Hood. It seems like she's like in a forest, and it seems like Pretty Selma, this is a why can't I think of the word? This is a palm tree, just like we have in Florida, and it seems like there's sand. So it seems like Little Red Riding Hood is in a forest, and Pretty Selma is actually on like an island or near a beach. So we can also say that too. Lots of differences, right? And this is just from the pictures. We aren't even reading the stories. So Little Red Riding Hood looks like she's in a forest, right? And it seems like Pretty Selma is on an island or near a beach, okay? So they're also, we know they're both girls, they're both going somewhere, they're both carrying something, so we can add that into the middle. They're both carrying something, okay? And obviously little things here and there, like they're both wearing shoes, they both have eyes, like things like that. Those things aren't as important. Now, if we were to read these two different stories, we could tell even more so how these versions of the stories are different, okay? Because Little Red Riding Hood, what her character does and how her character acts might actually be different than how Pretty Selma acts. They might have the same problems. They might both be watched by a dog, or they might both be going to go see their grandmother and to help their grandmother, and then their grandmother might get eaten by this animal. those plots, those problems might be the same, but the way that they act and the way that they treat each other might be different. So when you are reading the next stories, and here's our Venn diagram that we made. When you're reading these next stories, I want you to think about that. What things inside of the story were the same? Was the plot the same? Were the characters the same? Was the setting where they are the same? Are those things different? Because you have to be able to understand if those things are the same or if they're different. I do not just want you to think about what the character looks like. I want you to compare and contrast how the character sounds, how the characters act, how the characters feel. I also want you to compare and contrast the plot. What happens? Compare and contrast what happens in one story versus what happens in the other story. And I also want you to compare and contrast the setting. Where are they? How is the setting the same and is the setting different? I don't want, because being able to say that one character looks this way and another character looks that way is a good start, but that's like the very surface. That's not really going to help us understand the two versions of the story that great. That's just going to show us that we can look at something and we can say that this looks different, that looks different. We want to know and understand deeply how the stories are actually different and not just how the characters are different. So I'm going to be putting this story up for you guys. It's actually, I might be doing this story. Yeah, I'm going to do this story tomorrow with you guys together. We're going to talk about the turtle and the rabbit, and we're going to talk about the fox and the snail, and we're going to compare and contrast how they're the same and how they're different. Okay, so make sure when you start your assignments that you can always draw a Venn diagram on your pieces of paper. That way it's easier for you to actually understand the story and to actually get your answers for the questions. But remember, do not just think about what the characters look like. I want you to think about how the characters act, how they feel, how they respond. I want you to think about how the plot is different, what happens in the story, and I also want you to think about how the setting is the same or different. All right, guys, I'll talk to you later.